Hey Amarillo, I'm Jason Boyett, and you're listening to Hey Amarillo, the interview podcast featuring some of the most interesting people and stories of Amarillo, Texas. This week's episode is sponsored by Jimmy John's Gourmet Sandwiches. Jimmy John's has 3 locations in Amarillo, 2 along I-40 and 1 downtown. These franchise locations are owned and operated by a local resident. And he wants to introduce listeners to the new Mediterranean wrap, which features hummus, feta cheese, fresh veggies, and breezy Mediterranean vibes. That's what the copy says. There's a veggie version of this wrap and a chicken version. Thanks to the locally owned Jimmy John's for sponsoring the show. And as part of this podcast partnership with Brick and Elm Magazine, I want to give a podcast shout out to Bloomology, the Amarillo College First Responders Academy, and Street Toyota. The new September-October issue of Brick and Elm is available at a variety of locations across town, including the new Market Street at Coulter and the Loop. Today's guest is Tia Marie Hunt. By day, she works in development at West Texas A&M University as a donor relations coordinator. By night and on weekends, she's a singer and musician who performs under the name Tia Marie. She recently released a single titled Love on streaming platforms, and she'll be performing this Saturday as one of the local artists at the Hoodoo Mural Festival downtown. Tia Marie opens the ANB Stage at 3 p.m. before the Blue Johnnies, and we talk about, in this episode, her growing local career, the transition from singing music at church to singing in a big festival setting like Hoodoo, and what might be next for her career. Here's Tia Marie. Tia Marie Hunt, welcome to the Hey Amarillo podcast. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm honored to have you. I know a lot of guests may recognize your name because you perform quite a bit in this area, but I'm eager to hear more about your story and to introduce that story to them too. And I want to start the same way I start with all my guests, and that's just to ask how you ended up here in Amarillo. So what brought you to this area in the first place?
I think it's a combination of things. The main thing being that I came to WT.
Okay.
So attending there is what brought me to the area.
As a student, like that was your entry point?
For the most part.
Okay.
My parents were here. They met actually when it was West Texas State. And my mom's side of the family lives in Amarillo. They've always lived here. So we used to come up for Christmas all the time.
Okay.
And so I was vaguely familiar now, as much as you can remember as a kid,
Yeah, a place you go for holidays and stay at grandparents' houses.
I remember Sutherland's. I was like passing by on the way to my Aunt Barbara's house years ago, but that's all I could remember when I'd come up and saw my first snow. So I guess I was introduced then coming up for Christmas all of the time. But then, I guess we would also go to homecoming. And so when I decided to come here is when I was officially here.
Okay. Where were you living at the time, like before you came to WT?
Yeah, so I spent most of my life in Jasper, Texas.
Okay.
Which is like near Houston, Beaumont, 45 minutes from Louisiana.
Okay. I was going to say, that's far enough away that a lot of listeners won't immediately know,
yes.
Jasper, Texas.
Yes, I've learned to carry around the Texas symbol on my hand.
Okay, and you show on your hand where Jasper is.
Yes.
Being that close to Louisiana, did it have a different feel, that kind of Texas, to the kind of Texas you encounter here in the Panhandle? Culturally, just in terms of the people, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I would say so. I think the food, most of all, being so used to being around crawfish boils, it was just an average thing versus, I'm feeling like that today, And then naturally, the demographics a lot different. More African-American people and Creole people, things like that make the difference. And then, of course, a lot of more trees and water in that area. So I didn't realize I was going to miss that,
right?
But also what came with the trees was like the mini plague of Egypt is what I call it, because there's so many bugs that come with the trees. Yeah. So it's beautiful and it's wonderful, but there are a lot of bugs that come with that.
Yeah, we have different kinds of bugs here.
Yes.
Tell me about the decision to go to WT. Like after you had grown up there, certainly there are plenty of places you could go to college in that part of Texas.
Yeah.
Why come up here?
Well, I remember liking it. There was one homecoming in particular. It had to have been maybe the year or two before I ended up deciding where I was going because naturally it wasn't on my radar. Like colleges, I wasn't really thinking about them the first couple of years of high school. But I think maybe that junior year, we'd come up for homecoming and we're visiting family. And we went to one of I think it was the African American students' homecoming. They had their own event going that week. And I just felt welcomed. And I remember thinking it felt like where God wanted me to be. So I applied and got in.
I was going to say, you probably lived about as far from WT as you could live, but still be in Texas.
Yeah.
Coming from that part of the state.
Right.
And so, that is a long way to come.
It is.
For college, even though you did have family here.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if you could talk about some of those things that you said were different that you missed, knowing that where you grew up had a heavier African-American population. So culturally, you're moving to a place like Canyon where there's less diversity. Was that something that that you felt or that seemed significant to you?
I don't think as much at the time. Like initially, I guess because of how my classrooms looked, it wasn't crazy abnormal.
Okay.
But I think over time, realizing that campus was more diverse than the area itself.
Yeah.
I think that's when I was like, oh, okay. So I guess I didn't notice it at first because, again, campus was a little bit more diverse with all kinds of people coming in.
It's an incredibly diverse campus. I think surprisingly so to a lot of people.
For sure.
Did you know what you wanted to do? Like you mentioned your first couple of years of high school and college wasn't, on your radar. Like, did you apply to WT knowing, okay, this is what I'm going to study?
I did not.
Okay. So you're just going to the university, but you didn't really have a path lined out.
No, I had interest. Naturally, music was a big part of that because of my family. But I got there and I remember thinking, I was like, oh, maybe I should just study business, general business. That'll be applicable to a lot of things, And of course, because I was thinking general, I got there and then they were like, oh, well, here are all of the things that you'll study because it's so generic. And it didn't leave a lot of room for electives.
Okay.
And I knew I wanted to study Spanish too. So I got there. And once I realized that there wasn't a lot of space for electives, then I asked my advisor, can I study Spanish? Is that a thing? And she went, yeah, sure. We have a Spanish department. And so then I decided that I was going to major in Spanish instead.
When you make a choice like that, a lot of people who do that want to teach Spanish, or they might be going into, some sort of international career where they're going to need Spanish. Like, was that your thinking, or were you just thinking, I'm interested and I want to learn how to speak Spanish?
I definitely was just thinking, I want to learn it. I enjoyed the culture and something about learning the language. I took 3 Spanishes in high school, and there were like 10 of us who signed a petition to have a 4th Spanish, but it did not fly at all. So I just enjoyed it that much that I got there and just genuinely was interested in that. But no, teaching wasn't something I wanted to do. My mom taught for like 30 years, and I wholly believe that it's a calling. Mm-hmm. And I didn't want to do it just for like summers off or anything like that. And so since I didn't feel called towards it, even though I did enjoy it, I did a little bit of like ESL. I helped with some of the students who struggled with reading in English. I did that my senior year in high school, and I was good friends because my mom did ESL. I was in with the students and some of the teachers that she knew and taught with. So I did enjoy that aspect, but I never saw myself as teaching.
Okay. Yeah. So when you make a decision to major in Spanish, what do you start to think about once you graduate? What does that look like when you're thinking of a career? Because a lot of us, and this includes me, have careers that really didn't have anything to do with what I studied in college. A lot of people go down a path, and that path leads them right into a certain career based on their major. So how are you thinking career-wise at that point?
I wasn't a ton. I just was like, I really like this. And of course, people were telling me like, oh, you can do anything. You can do this. You can do that with it. Even if you don't teach, being an ambassador and translating and all the things. I have to go back to just genuinely being interested in the culture and the language. And naturally, I have always seen it eventually coming full circle with music and being able to speak to that community with music, just because that is something that I've always enjoyed. So
let's talk about your music in a moment. Tell me where you did end up as a career, with the understanding that most musicians, have the thing that pays the bills and the thing that's the passion project. Right. And for a lot of times those are going to overlap. You can't do one or the other. Well, I guess you could do one and not the music, but it's hard to be a full-time musician in a place like this. And so tell me what the work side of your life looks like now.
Now I am working at WT. I'm in the foundation. So the donor side of things, I'm the donor relations coordinator. So I do a lot of acknowledgments with our donors when they give on every level. No gift is too small. Also do a lot of bereavement things when donors, faculty, staff, students, alumni pass. We send a packet through the president's office to them, to the family. Endowment reporting is another big thing. So that's what I'm doing currently.
And that office has been, I guess, really active, really exciting the past few years with the One West campaign, a lot of major gifts coming into the college, a lot of activity on college because of the foundation. So is that something that, whether you plan to end up there or not, like something that you found, okay, this is a fulfilling thing to do. This is something that's good.
Yeah, it's definitely been a learning curve for me because as a student, I wasn't aware of where funds were coming from. I knew they were coming from somewhere. I received scholarships from time to time. And
you don't ever question who's paying or where it's coming from.
I knew people were, but I didn't know how it was organized. And not even knowing that, buildings are named after the people who gave. I never knew that. That wasn't something I don't think when I was in school was as connected between the donor side of things and student versus that's what they've been doing since I've been there and probably almost a decade now of really connecting and making sure students are more aware of that side of things.
Being someone who was relatively new to the area, you're now in a position where you're exposed to a lot of the generosity of local people, a lot of very successful local people who have, a lot of dollars to throw at the university for a variety of reasons. Does it help you understand the Panhandle a little bit better as a newcomer?
I think so. It helps me realize just how passionate that people here are about the community, and a big part of that being the university because it brings so many different kinds of people here. So that's been really cool to see.
Do you think about WT in a different way now that you're on the administration side or the foundation side and not a student? Do you think about it differently or deeper or from a different perspective?
Yeah, I think I'm more aware. I think I keep using that, but I'm more aware of what goes into it. From admissions and then marketing and communication, everything that goes in trying to get students in this area to come to WT versus our surrounding universities or community colleges. And then, even past them graduating, keeping alumni on and educating them on the importance of giving back to the community they came from. So that's not something I would have ever thought about before.
Actually, a lot of people living in the Texas Panhandle, you have a day job and then you also have a nights and weekends job, career, pursuit as a musician. And one of the things that first landed you on my radar was seeing you perform last year at the Hoodoo Mural Festival and knowing that you're going to do the same again this year. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay. So tell me about that part of your life. Have you always been a singer? Have you always been into music and that sort of thing?
Yeah, as far as I can remember. So my parents are pastors.
Okay.
And so they're also like being the first family. We also happen to be that first family that has always led worship at the church.
And you just grow up performing in front of people too.
Exactly. As young as I can remember, my parents, my mom and dad would sing, my brother, and then they would call me up to do the same. And then it was teaching me to play the keys, and that kind of flowed into eventually I was leading here and there. And so singing with my family is what I've known most of my life. I would say the last 5 years on and off is where I kind of stepped out and started doing my own thing.
Okay.
I would do things here and there with my brother, who's been in music a really long time and has taught me a lot about production. But yeah, I would say more recently in the 5-ish years on and off is where I've kind of been doing music on my own.
What kind of church do your parents pastor?
What kind of
Yeah,
church?
like what, is it a local church at this point, or are they still in Jasper?
So they are here.
Okay.
The ministry is on actually WT campus.
Okay.
And they've been using the chapel for the past 7 years. Yeah. Started that right when I graduated. So it's been about 7 years.
Okay. What's it called?
It's called RAM, which is short for Restoration Apostolic Ministries.
Okay. And so tell me about, the desire to, like you said, to do your own music, having grown up performing in the church, singing songs, leading worship, that sort of thing. And then thinking, okay, I'm going to transition to another style of music. For a lot of people, like that's maybe not even style of music, another focus of your music. For a lot of people, sometimes that's a hard transition because you're taking something that's very, very personally meaningful, and then you're kind of switching up the audience. It's not church members anymore.
Yeah.
Tell me about that decision, that process.
I don't know that it was a decision. I have been writing for a really long time. I've always kind of, between journaling and writing poetry and my brother, who's also a songwriter, it's always been very natural for me. I remember, I would say concretely writing like good songs was probably high school.
Okay.
And so I've always written the music that, not necessarily that I've been performing lately, but the style to where it didn't feel like what I would call like vertical worship.
Okay.
Right? It doesn't say God directly, or it's not the typical worship that you would sing in church on Sunday.
Like where God is the subject of the song, or the audience for the song.
Yes. And so it wasn't a decision to start doing that or changing it up per se for me, as much as I've always had this desire, or this was my natural writing style. And it was more of a wrestle of, oh gosh, okay, this is who I am. This is what I believe. But I also write in this way that is just about my experiences. And of course, there was initial hesitation about, okay, how is this going to be received? And like people knowing who I am and who my family is. But it was more so me becoming more bold in it, is what I would say. And just being confident that my experiences would resonate with other people.
Okay. I know a lot of performers that come out of the church, like you said, you're moving from a safe place, where you're singing in a worship setting, to maybe you're performing in a bar, or you're performing in more secular environments. A lot of people, like there's a comfort that you kind of lose, and you have to get used to being in a place where it's not guaranteed that everybody's going to love you and appreciate you. Was that something that you had to getting out of your comfort zone in that way? Did it feel like, oh, okay, I'm in this new place now?
Not really, because I don't think the place itself was what I had to get comfortable with.
Okay.
It was no longer doing it with my family or having my brother on stage with me. It was just, tackling it as a solo artist, which I've always written for me. So it only made sense. I feel fortunate in that way that I didn't, there's never been a hesitation for me stepping into a bar or a restaurant or a place that doesn't have God as the focus. Like it doesn't matter to me, because it's wrapped up in who I am, and I take God everywhere I go. So it's no different for me.
In a church setting, people want you to succeed. You can't always say that in a bar setting.
Sure.
Does that feel different? Or was that something, the support side of things? Yeah. I'm thinking of that. I've performed in some places too. And, there's a safety that you leave behind. Not like my personal safety, but maybe an emotional safety.
Maybe. I have to stick with it. It hasn't been like that for me. Because again, when I think of even one of my first single called Stay In, for me, it's about God's faithfulness. And people who maybe don't share the same belief as me will hear it and think it's just about a relationship. Mm-hmm. Because that's the style that I've written it in. I wasn't trying to hide anything. I am honest when I perform it and tell people what it's about. But that's what they hear. And I think that's poetic because I honestly think that what people look up to in a relationship, like, to me, it's the same thing. Mm-hmm. It's just a higher, more perfect standard of what it is. So when I go into other places, it's not necessarily that I felt safer in church. I honestly have felt more freedom just because I've not thought the songs that I create, I could sing in church. Like, I still don't think that I can, like, maybe stay in naturally, because when I explain it, they're like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
But, me singing about my other experiences, frustrations or whatever it may be, like, I don't know that I could sing those on Sunday.
Okay. For listeners who haven't heard you perform, describe your music, like stylistically. How do you describe it?
Yeah, I would say R&B, neo soul. I've been told I sound jazzy.
Does that feel accurate? Like jazzy?
I think I wouldn't say that it's jazz. I think that there are...
maybe people in the Texas Panhandle don't have a full understanding of what jazz is too.
Yeah. Well, it's just not what I think of when I think jazz, because I think where the jazz comes from, or what the jazziness comes from, is because I grew up listening to gospel music. Mm-hmm. And so those are very closely intertwined to me, the complexity of chords and notes. And yeah, so I think maybe that's where it speaks to. But I don't claim jazz itself, just because I don't feel like I've delved deep enough into that quite yet.
Tell me about performing here in a place where if we're known for a style of music, it's probably more in the countryside, mm-hmm. red dirt, Americana, all of that side. You wouldn't normally categorize it as jazzy, or there's some gospel influences clearly, but mm-hmm. like, you're not putting yourself within that category. Has it been difficult to find an audience, to find places to perform? Like, you're pushing a little bit against the cultural tide that way. Yeah. Or do you feel like that's true? Is that just me projecting on you?
No, I think that's very valid. I think I had a lot of fear mm-hmm. stepping out, being like, I don't sound like anyone. Like, are they going to want to listen to me? Because I can only do what I know. Mm-hmm. And even when I've tried to cover, I've covered like a few country songs and they don't sound country, But I haven't had a fear necessarily. I feel like my sound has been very welcomed, and it still surprises me because I go into places, and whether it's open mic or, a place that someone just before me played country, I just get up and I'm like, hey, this is what I've got, and it's been well received. So I feel fortunate that I haven't had any pushback, even though my sound isn't popular here.
Okay. Would you go so far as to say that your sound is not popular here? Or it just doesn't align with what's most popular?
I shouldn't say it's not popular. It's just not as played.
Okay.
In this area.
But you found an audience.
Everywhere I go, people are open and welcome, and they like it. So mm-hmm. I guess I found an audience, but...
I want to talk about the music scene. Tell me about, some of the places where you've had the opportunity to perform. You've talked about open mic nights and things like that. Like, is this a place where you found opportunity to share your music with people.
Yeah, absolutely. Because really, me developing as an artist and the passion growing, that didn't happen until I was halfway through college. So I've not performed anywhere else. I've not developed and done those things, really been in the music scene anywhere else. I did start in open mics, mostly at the 806, because I was just looking for a place to practice and, not sing to my four walls anymore. And outside of that, it's been restaurants. I haven't been at venues, really. Yeah, just anywhere that people would randomly see me and be like, hey, you want to play at this place? I'm like, okay.
Do you have a desire for your career to grow beyond what you're doing here? Like when you think, I don't know, when you think about your career as a musician, do you think, well, in 15 years, I'll still be working at the WT Foundation and then playing at restaurants? Or do you plan to expand it?
Yeah, I definitely have dreams to expand it. I've had those dreams for a very long time.
I mean, you've recorded music, you've released, an album. Like you're going beyond performing at restaurants in sort of your vision for what you want to do.
Yeah. I haven't released an album yet.
Oh, you have not?
I have not. That is definitely one of the goals.
Okay.
I have 2 singles out currently. And then I did a video more recently for one of the songs. But I definitely would like to do this full time and, just be able to put more music out. And so when I'm performing it, it's just my stuff. I'm not a cover artist. And so I naturally enjoy doing my own things more. And slowly but surely, I'm kind of trying to pace myself while actively doing this, but I would like to expand it for sure.
Do you have another performer or singer-songwriter that you sort of look at their career and think, that's my path? Like that's the category, or that's the channel, or that's the example that I want to follow?
Yeah.
Who is that?
There are a few people that come to mind. I'll say in my adulthood, one of my biggest inspirations has been Tori Kelly.
Mm-hmm.
She's a singer-songwriter as well, musician. And yeah, I related first with her lyrics and the style that she wrote. And when I heard her songs, I was thinking, oh my gosh, someone else is also doing this, and then she shares my faith as well. And then also being someone who doesn't just sing about God or her faith, but she sings about her experiences, gave me all the more motivation to be like, oh, this is possible.
So I want to talk a little bit about, you mentioned that you've done a lot of performances like in a restaurant setting or at open mic nights, and performing at Hoodoo last year is a much larger setting. Mm-hmm. It's a lot more open setting. Like, even in a restaurant, people are sort of contained. In Hoodoo, they're just moving around, right. With an open outdoor stage. Tell me about that experience, what it was like last year, and maybe what you're looking forward to about this year.
Yeah. So last year, my brother and I put together a literal band of friends. And that was my first time, I think. Yeah, that was my first time playing with a band, my own stuff and covers. And because naturally in this area, because there aren't a plethora of musicians who play my specific genre, that was a learning experience for us all. It was fun. I got to let go a little bit. I'm used to going places with me and my guitar, and I'm playing everything. I still did, just because that's important to me, to be able to perform and still play. But, I was able to put down my guitar for a few of the songs, or, just stop picking or strumming just for a bit, just to focus on conveying that through my vocals. And
it's a different energy too, like when you've got a band behind you.
It is. It gave me a lot of energy for sure. And people seemed receptive. They thought we had been playing together for a long time. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh no, we have been practicing for like a month now. Yeah. So that was cool. And then this year I am going to be playing solo. Okay. Just because there are some things that I've been thinking through as far as, gigs that I want to take on in the future. I think it would be great just for my learning on how to back myself up and, whether that's backing tracks and my instruments and just honing in my own skills that way.
What was your impression of that festival itself? Was that the first time you'd been at Hoodoo, or had you been in any of the previous years?
It was my first time experiencing the whole thing. The year before last, I played a luncheon on like a Thursday leading up to it, but I didn't get to attend the full thing. It also landed on WT's homecoming, so it was like a busy time, which luckily last year and this year they aren't on the same weekend. But it was really cool. I think I felt really grateful to be a part of that lineup just because some of those people I'd never heard of, and then some I had, and just to be following people who have the following that they have and the skill, it's very inspiring to see them do their own sets, the DJs, and, one guy who's like on the drums and he's got his backing tracks and like, this is amazing.
Yeah.
And then to see the art too. I've never been a part of anything like that, to see like the different mediums come together.
I want to close this section by asking you about this area. Since you came here for college, that's never a guarantee that you're going to stay here once the college part is done. What is it about Amarillo and Canyon, the Texas Panhandle, that has kept you here? Because obviously you could do the work you're doing, working for a foundation, working in the nonprofit world, anywhere. As an artist, it might be harder here for you than it might be if you were in someplace like Houston. So tell me why you've stayed.
Yeah, I think that's a combination of things. Just like I came into college and I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I graduated knowing that I was passionate about music, but not sure what that looked like or how I would exactly get to those goals. So, just figuring those things out. And by that time, my family was back in the area. So I had a little bit of like cushion and safety to fall back on to figure out things. And then I think what still kept me here is just the friends that I've made too, as well as one of the things that I think is important and smart that, trying to make it in music specifically, like you could go somewhere big and try to break into it, but I think it's smarter to start where you are. And these are tips that I've heard from other people in music and even agents and all types of people who have been in the industry for a long time of you could be, not that I'm necessarily a big fish, but, starting in a smaller pond and, getting comfortable being in front of this audience. And if I can make a decent name for myself or just become a little bit more known, then it won't be as much as a shock if I do decide to go elsewhere.
Okay.
So this has been breeding ground for just confidence and just building that for me.
You feel like Amarillo is a good music town?
I think so, but it's also been very kind to me. So I have that.
This episode of Hey Amarillo is supported by Amarillo Habitat for Humanity, which works with families across the city to provide an alternative path to homeownership. Earlier this year, Amarillo Habitat handed over the keys to its 120th local home. This process isn't a free giveaway, but it includes financial stability courses, volunteer construction, sweat equity from the families, reasonable down payments, and no interest loans. Strong and stable homes help build strong and stable communities. And there are a lot of great nonprofits in Amarillo, but Habitat is the only one that focuses on affordable home ownership, helping people help themselves. And that's why I love this organization. Learn more at amarillohabitat.org, and thanks to Amarillo Habitat for Humanity for sponsoring the podcast. Okay, I'm back with Tia Marie. Tia, this is the part of the show I call 8 Straight. 8 Straight is sponsored every week by Panhandle Plains Historical Museum in Canyon. I know you're familiar with it. It's the largest history museum in Texas, and its artifacts include bison bones that were uncovered in 2002 during excavations for a city swimming pool in Stinnett. Museum staff helped with the excavation once they found the skeleton, and they did some radiocarbon dating, which put the age of the bones at more than 5,000 years old. So you can see a cast of the complete skeleton in Stinnett, and then there are a few of the actual bones at Panhandle Plains. See that, learn more at panhandleplains.org. Okay, first question. When you think of Amarillo 10 years from now, what do you hope for?
More of the different communities maybe coming together. I feel like I've dipped into a few of them since I've been here.
Okay, like what kind of communities?
I think culturally, yeah. And this is coming from an outsider that I'm still getting familiar with
you're still
all of the things, but does that make sense?
I think so.
Okay.
I think people tend to spend time with the same groups of people here, which is great. You build close relationships.
Right.
There's not often a lot of dipping your toe into different groups, or people that think differently from you or believe differently or like different music. That's one of the things I like about Hoodoo is that it's just so many different people all together at a party. So I understand what you're saying. Other than wind, what does this area have too much of?
The first thing that came to mind was sports bars, but I just don't. That's not my idea of spending time with people and trying to get to, have fun, because it's just loud usually. But I'm not against them. There are a lot of them.
There's a lot of people that, obviously people like sports here. I'm not a sports bar guy. There are some people that's where they want to watch the game. They don't want to watch at home on their couch. They want to be with other people.
It's a sense of community for them.
I guess so. That's one of the worlds that I have not dipped my toes in, Right. What does this area not have enough of?
Non-sports bar lounges.
Okay.
To hang out, and I found they're either things for teenagers or people who like the sports bar or just bar scenes, and I don't naturally fit in both of those. So I envision it would be a music related thing. Yeah.
But a performance venue that is not, is not surrounded by TVs and people talking and all that kind of stuff. Right. That does have sort of a lounge feeling to it. Yeah. There's not a lot of that here.
Yeah, Yes.
That's okay. Well,
that's what I think there should be more of.
Okay, what's your favorite street in Amarillo?
I'd have to say 6th, just because I spent more time. It started with the 806, but even on Eeks and different places that I've learned.
There's definitely a lot of interesting performance venues there.
Yeah.
Along that stretch. What's your favorite local restaurant or food truck?
I really like Yellow City street food. I found them on accident one time, and I went with my cousins, my oldest cousin, she's from Austin. So she was like, oh, this is a hole in the wall place. This is good job, Tia. And so I really like that. I crave certain things when I go there, but it's always good. Then also, I don't know if it's just to this area, but 575 Pizzeria. I really like gourmet pizza. So
Yep. 575 is homegrown, although they do have a location in Dallas now. So,
I didn't know that.
Yep, in Little Elm, I believe.
Nice.
Okay, what's the most underrated aspect of living in Amarillo?
I'm going to say the fact that it has 4 seasons, because I did not grow up with 4 seasons. We had summer and spring and some fall. It rained a lot in Southeast Texas. And I think it's when I got here that it started snowing there. So maybe I sent it that way. I don't know. But I'd say 4 seasons.
That's definitely a draw. At this point, we're very ready for the end of summer and fall to commence. What's your favorite local performance venue? You've named a few. Where do you like to play?
See, I feel like I haven't played in very many venues yet. I've mostly been in restaurants.
Restaurants are hard to perform in because people are not always attentive.
Yeah.
They want you to be background music. I was going to say, is there one where you feel like, I feel comfortable in this spot playing my music here?
I don't have a preference. I think just the aesthetic at Savor is nice. And because the music that they play when they don't have live music, I think has the same chill vibe as me.
Right.
That I enjoy that aspect of it. And I get that because I have times where I want people to listen, to what I'm saying. But then there are times like, especially if I'm tired, like I don't want people to actively listen. I just want them to passively listen. And if they clap and like make eye contact, great. If not, then I'm just going to play around and have fun. And it's low pressure. So I think I like that about a restaurant.
Okay. And when was the last time you visited Cadillac Ranch?
It's been a little bit over a year.
What was the occasion a year ago?
I took a friend out who was visiting Texas for the first time.
Okay. That's a must stop then if this is your first time in Texas or Amarillo, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
That concludes the 8 straight questions I like to close by asking my guests to endorse something. So what's one thing you would like listeners to know about or to experience?
I would say Hoodoo, if I'm allowed to say that. Not just because I'm playing there, but I genuinely like how it brings together different types of artists. Not just those who are muralists and musicians, but also the vendors who create things. So I think it's just a cool space, and I like being in those circles.
Okay. That's a good endorsement.
Yeah.
I'm excited about it too. Tia Marie, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And that concludes the episode. I want to say thanks to Tia Marie for the interview. You can follow her on social media at Tia Marie Musica. And you can find out more about Hoodoo Mural Festival at hoodoomural.com. If you haven't been to Hoodoo before, I really do recommend it. It's such a fun afternoon. It's this Saturday. Thanks also to Jimmy John's, Amarillo Habitat for Humanity, and Panhandle Plains Historical Museum for supporting this podcast, and to Angelina Marie for editing every week. Thank you for listening. Hey Amarillo exists on a weekly basis because of listeners like you and the local people who support it financially through patreon.com/HeyAmarillo. Hey Amarillo's executive producers include Patrick Burns, Jason Burr, Katie Linger, Corey Burns, Josh Wood, Wes Reeves, Cindy Graham, and Barbara and Jim Witten. This has been episode 371. My name is Jason Boyett, and I'll see you next week.